"Marry him," the judge said, "or sign the deed over by sundown." Clara Whitmore looked up from the defendant's bench and met the eyes of the most dangerous man in 3 counties. Rhett Maddox, wanted in 2 states. A killer according to every wanted poster nailed to every post between here and Denver. He stood at the back of that courtroom like he owned it hat in hand, jaw set, and said 7 words that changed her life completely. "I'll marry her, and I'll keep what's hers." If this story already has you hooked, subscribe to our channel right now and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story travels. The gavel came down so hard it cracked the edge of the judge's bench, and Clara didn't flinch. She'd been flinching for 6 months, since the morning they found her husband Thomas, face down in the creek, with a bullet in his back. Since the week the bank called in the note she didn't know existed, since the day Edgar Vance's men rode up to her fence line and told her she had 30 days to vacate. She was done flinching, done being quiet, done pretending this was anything other than what it was. The court finds the property claim filed by Mr. Edgar Vance to be procedurally sound. Judge Harlan Briggs announced, not even looking at her. The Whitmore Ranch 312 acres will revert to the Vance Land Holdings Trust, unless Mrs. Whitmore can demonstrate legal right of continued ownership by sundown today. Clara's lawyer, a thin, nervous man named Aldous Price, who had sweated through his collar before 9 in the morning, leaned over and whispered, "There's nothing more I can do, Clara. The deed was in Thomas's name alone. Without a male heir or a legal husband, the property—" "I know what the law says." She cut him off. Her voice was steady. Her hands were not. She pressed them flat against the table in front of her and stared at the seal on the wall above Judge Briggs's head. The territory of Colorado. Justice, order, law. Edgar Vance sat across the aisle with his boots crossed at the ankle and a smile that hadn't moved in 3 hours. He was a tall man, broad through the shoulders, with silver hair, and the kind of face that looked trustworthy right up until the moment it didn't. He had been Thomas's business partner once. He had been at Thomas's funeral hat, pressed to his chest, eyes wet. Clara had watched him cry over her husband's grave. Now she watched him try to steal everything her husband had built. Mrs. Whitmore. Judge Briggs finally looked at her, and his expression was not unkind, which somehow made it worse. "I understand this situation is difficult, but the law is the law, unless you can produce a husband with legal standing before this court by sundown." The back door of the courtroom opened. Everyone heard it. The room went still in that particular way rooms go still when something that doesn't belong walks through a door. Clara turned. Rhett Maddox stood in the doorway. She had never met him, but she knew his face the way everyone in the territory knew it from the wanted poster tacked to the post outside the marshal's office. The one with the bold black letters across the bottom, "Armed and Dangerous." Reward, $800. He was 34 years old, lean and dark-eyed, with the kind of stillness that came not from calm, but from practice. He had learned to be still the way you learn to hold your breath underwater. He walked up the center aisle of the courtroom, and the murmuring that broke out behind him didn't slow him down by a single step. Marshal Grady half rose from his chair near the wall. "Maddox." "Sit down, Ray." Rhett didn't look at him. "I'm not here for trouble." He stopped in front of the judge's bench and put his hat on the railing in front of him. Then he turned, not to the judge, not to Edgar Vance, but to Clara. Just to Clara. "I'll marry her," he said, "and I'll keep what's hers." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Clara had ever heard. She stood up. Her chair scraped back against the floor. "I don't know you," she said. "No," he agreed. "You don't. You're wanted. Not in Colorado, not anymore." He reached into the breast pocket of his jacket and set a piece of paper on the table in front of Judge Briggs. "Pardon came through last week. Signed by the territorial governor. I'm a free man, Judge, legal as any man in this room." Briggs picked up the paper, studied it. His jaw moved once like he was chewing something he didn't like the taste of. "This appears to be in order," the judge said slowly. "Then there's nothing stopping this marriage," Rhett said. He hadn't looked away from Clara once. She searched his face for what she was supposed to find there, some trace of motive, some tell, some crack in the surface. All she found was a man who was waiting, patient in the way that only people who have survived a great deal can be patient. "Why?" she said. It wasn't a question so much as a demand. "Because you deserve to keep what's yours," he said. "And because nobody in this county has the backbone to stand in front of Edgar Vance. I do." Vance was on his feet now. "This is an outrage. This man is a criminal." "Former criminal," Rhett said, glancing at him for the first time. "And you're a fraud. I know the difference between a man and what's written about him. Do you?" "Judge." Vance's voice rose. "You cannot permit this court to be hijacked by Mr. Vance." Briggs held up one hand. "Sit down." He looked at Clara. "Mrs. Whitmore, the decision is yours. This court will recess for 15 minutes. When we reconvene, you will give your answer." Clara stood in the narrow hallway outside the courtroom with her back against the wall and her eyes on the ceiling, and her lawyer talking at her from 2 feet away, without her hearing a single word he said. She was doing math in her head. Thomas had been gone 6 months. She had run the ranch herself, 30 head of cattle, 2 ranch hands, a well that was starting to run slow. She had made the payments. She had kept the fence line. She had learned to do things she had never done before, and done them without complaint, because the land was all she had left of him, and she was not going to let it go. She was also 31 years old and not naive about what it meant to marry a stranger. "Clara." Aldous was still talking. "Clara, you have to think about this rationally." "I am thinking rationally," she said. "That's the problem." She pushed off the wall and walked to the far end of the hallway, where Rhett Maddox stood alone, leaning against the window frame, looking out at the street below. He heard her coming and turned before she spoke. "You want something?" she said. "Everyone who walks into a courtroom wants something." "What is it?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, 3 months ago, Edgar Vance burned my brother's homestead to the ground. My brother had a wife and 2 children. They lost everything. Vance used the same legal trick he's using on you, called in a note, claimed the deed used a judge he owned." He paused. "My brother didn't have anyone to stand up for him. I wasn't there." Clara watched him. "And now you're making it right." "I'm trying to. By marrying me. By standing between you and a man who thinks the law belongs to whoever pays for it." He met her eyes. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to let me help. You keep the ranch. You run it however you want. I won't interfere with your life. And if I decide I want a real marriage." The words came out before she could stop them, and she saw the slight shift in his expression. Not surprise exactly, but something close. "Then we'll figure that out when we get there," he said. "But that's not why I'm here. I want to be clear about that." "Why are you being clear about it?" "Because you've already been lied to enough," he said. "And you're smart enough to know it." That was when she made her decision. Not because she trusted him. Not because she felt anything except desperate and tired and furious. But because he had just said the one thing that no one had said to her in 6 months of this whole ugly ordeal. He'd told her the truth. The ceremony took 11 minutes. Judge Briggs performed it himself in his chambers with Aldous Price and the court clerk as witnesses. Clara kept her hands folded in front of her. Rhett kept his at his sides. When Briggs said the word kiss, they both turned and looked at the judge with the same expression, and Briggs cleared his throat and said, "A handshake will suffice." Rhett held out his hand. Clara shook it. His grip was firm and warm, and he released her the second she released him. Edgar Vance was waiting in the corridor outside. He'd straightened his jacket, adjusted his expression into something approaching civility. But his eyes were flat and hard as river stones, and when they landed on Rhett, Clara felt the temperature in the hallway drop. "Well," Vance said. "Well," Rhett answered. "You think this changes something?" Vance spoke as if Clara weren't standing 3 feet away. "You think a piece of paper changes what's coming. The piece of paper already changed it," Rhett said. "The ranch belongs to the Whitmore family, which now includes me. You want to challenge that in court again?" Edgar, bring a better lawyer. Vance's gaze moved to Clara then, and something in it made her stomach clench. It wasn't anger. It was calculation. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, I genuinely hope you understand what you've done today. Allying yourself with a man like this. He tilted his head toward Rhett. There are consequences. Are you threatening her? Rhett asked. His voice didn't change. That was the frightening part. It didn't change at all. I'm offering perspective, Vance said. And then he smiled, put his hat on, and walked out of the courthouse. Clara stood still until his footsteps faded. Then she let out a breath she had been holding since 9 in the morning. That man, she said, is going to try to kill us. Probably, Red agreed. She looked at him. And that doesn't concern you. It concerns me a great deal, he said. That's different from being scared of it. The ride back to the ranch was mostly quiet. Clara drove the wagon. Rhett sat on the seat beside her with his hat pulled low and his rifle resting across his knees, watching the road ahead with the focused attention of a man who spent a lot of time watching roads. She had about 100 questions and no idea where to start. She started with the smallest one. Where have you been sleeping? My horse, he said. Then, reading her expression, I'll stay in the barn. You don't need to give me anything. I'm not going to have my husband sleeping in the barn, she said, and heard the strangeness of the word in her own mouth. Husband. There's a back room off the kitchen. It was Thomas's study. You can have that. He nodded. Thank you. Another silence. I should tell you, she said, that I have 2 ranch hands, Decker and Old Herm. They're good men, loyal. They're not going to be happy about this. I wouldn't expect them to be. And I don't... She stopped, tried again. I don't want you to make decisions about this ranch without talking to me first. I know who owes what, I know what needs doing, and I've been doing it. I don't need to be managed, B. He turned and looked at her then, and for a second she thought she'd overstepped. Then he said, Good. I don't know anything about cattle. She almost laughed. Not quite, but almost. You're serious. I grew up in Texas, he said. My family grew cotton. I've been on the run for 7 years. I know how to ride, and I know how to shoot, and I know how to read a man's intentions from 50 yards out. Cattle. He shook his head. You're going to have to teach me. This time she did laugh. Just a little, just for a second. It surprised her. That, she said, might be the first honest thing anyone said to me in 6 months. I have a policy, he said. What's that? I only lie to people I don't respect. She felt something shift low and quiet in the center of her chest. She didn't have a word for it. She pressed it down and kept her eyes on the road. Decker was waiting at the gate when they pulled in. He was 26, barrel-chested with red hair and a temper to match, and he had worked the Whitmore Ranch since Thomas hired him 4 years ago. He'd been one of the 2 men who carried her husband's body back from the creek. He had never said anything about that directly, but she had seen what it cost him, and she trusted him the way you trust someone who has stood next to you in the worst moments without asking for anything. He looked at Rhett. He looked at Clara. He looked at Rhett again. No, he said. Decker. Absolutely not, Clara. You know who this is. I know exactly who he is. He's Rhett Maddox. He's wanted in... Not anymore, Rhett said from the wagon. Decker's jaw tightened. I wasn't talking to you. Decker. Clara kept her voice level. I need you to listen to me. I need you to give me 5 minutes before you decide anything. She climbed down from the wagon. Come inside. She watched him weigh it. Watched his loyalty fight with his instinct. Loyalty won. It always did with Decker, and he turned and walked toward the house without another word. Rhett helped her with the horse. She hadn't asked him to. He just did it efficiently and quietly, like a man who understood that the best way to earn his place in a strange house was to make himself useful before he opened his mouth. She noticed. She wasn't sure yet if that was a good thing or a bad thing.
যাচ্ছি।
Inside, she told Decker everything. The court, the deadline, the deed, Vance's legal maneuver, the pardon, the marriage. All of it straight through, no softening. Decker sat at the kitchen table with his hands around a coffee mug and his face doing about 14 different things at once. When she finished, he said, "You could have lost the ranch." "I know. You could still lose it. Vance isn't going to stop because of a marriage certificate. I know that too, and you trust him." He jerked his chin toward the back of the house where they could hear the quiet sounds of Rhett settling into the study. "No," Clara said honestly. "Not yet." "But you married him." "I married the situation," she said. "He happened to be in it." Decker was quiet for a long time. Then, "Old Herm is going to lose his mind." "Old Herm loses his mind every Tuesday. He'll survive." A pause, then grudging, "He handled the horse right. I noticed. A man who doesn't know horses tries to show off or tries to step back. He just did the work." Decker turned the mug in his hands. "That doesn't mean I trust him." "It doesn't have to," she said. "I need you to watch him, that's all. Watch him tell me what you see and don't let your guard down. Can you do that?" He looked at her for a moment. Then he stood up, picked up his hat and said, "You're the boss, Clara. You always have been." He put the hat on. "I'll go tell Herm before he hears it from someone else and burn something down." He walked out and the kitchen was quiet. Clara sat at the table alone. She pressed both palms flat on the wood and looked at the window and breathed. She had just married a man she didn't know. She had done it to save a piece of land. And somewhere in the back of the house that man was sitting in her dead husband's study, and she had no idea, not even the first idea, what was going to happen next. She got up, put the coffee on, because whatever came next, it was going to need coffee. Rhett came out of the study just past 7. She was at the stove. She didn't turn around. "I can sleep in the barn," he said. "I wasn't trying to—" "Sit down," she said. "I made supper." Another pause. "You didn't have to." "I cook supper every night," she said. "It's not for you, you're just here." She heard the chair scrape back. He sat. She set 2 plates on the table and sat across from him, and they ate in silence for a while. She had made beans and cornbread because it was what she had. He ate everything on his plate and didn't comment on any of it. "The fence on the north pasture needs replacing," she said finally. 3 posts are rotted through and 1 section came down last week in the wind. I've been putting it off." "I can do fence posts," he said. "You said you grew up in cotton country." "Cotton doesn't need fences," he said. "But a fence post is a fence post." She studied him across the table. He held her gaze, not challenging, not performing, just present. "Edgar Vance is going to make a move soon," she said. "He didn't walk out of that courthouse like a man who was finished." "No," Rhett agreed. "He walked out like a man who was rearranging his plan." "What do you think he'll try next?" Rhett turned his fork over once in his hand. "He'll try the legal route first. He'll look for a reason to challenge the marriage, something procedural, something about the pardon, something." He set the fork down. "When that doesn't work, he'll try something else." "Something else," she repeated. His eyes met hers. "He burned my brother's house with my brother's family inside it and called it an accident. So yes, something else." The words fell into the room and sat there. "I see," she said quietly. "I should have told you that before you agreed to any of this," he said. "I'm telling you now, the man you're up against isn't just greedy. He's willing to hurt people. Badly." "I know what he is," Clara said. Her voice was very even. "He sat at my husband's funeral and he cried, and the whole time he already had the lawsuit drawn up in his office. I know exactly what he is." She picked up her coffee cup. "What I need to know is what you are." He looked at her for a long time. "I'm the man who's going to make sure he doesn't do to you what he did to my brother's family," he said. And if I told you right now that I didn't want your protection, that I could handle Edgar Vance myself?" "I'd say you probably could," he said. "You're clearly capable of handling things yourself. But capable isn't the same as safe, and safe is what I promised you." She set her cup down slowly. "You promised me that in front of a courtroom full of strangers. You didn't ask me first." "No," he said. "I didn't." He didn't flinch from it. "I'm sorry for that. I made an assumption, and I should have asked." She hadn't expected the apology. She wasn't sure what to do with it. "I'll think about whether I accept it," she said. "That's fair," he said. She stood up, cleared his plate without asking, and said, "The study lock is broken. I'll fix it tomorrow. Until then the door closes, but it doesn't lock." "I'll sleep with my back to it," he said. She stopped, turned. "What does that mean?" "It means nobody comes through that door without waking me up," he said simply. "That's all." She stood there for a moment in the middle of the kitchen. "Good night, Rhett," she said. "Good night, Clara," he said. She walked down the hall to her room and closed her door and sat on the edge of her bed and pressed her hands together and tried to remember who she had been before all of this, before Thomas died, before the lawsuit, before today. She could remember the shape of that woman, the certainty of her, the ease. She wasn't that woman anymore. Maybe that was all right. She lay down, closed her eyes, closed. Down the hall, she heard the study door close softly, and the house settled into the kind of quiet it hadn't had in months. Not the empty quiet of a widow's house, but something else. Something almost like a held breath. Something almost like the first night of whatever came next. She was already at the fence line when Rhett found her the next morning. Not the north pasture fence, the one closest to the road, the one that faced Vance's property line, a quarter-mile east. She had a post driver in her hands, and she was working the third post in like she had something to prove, which she did, though she wouldn't have said so out loud. Rhett stopped a few feet away and watched her for a moment. She didn't stop working. "You could have woken me," he said. "I've been doing this fence since 6, she said. "I didn't need you awake at 6. I was awake at 5. She stopped, looked at him. "Why?" "Habit," he said. He reached out and took the post driver from her hands, not pulling it, just placing his hand below hers and waiting until she let go. "Show me how you want it set." She showed him. He did it without complaint and without showing off, just steady and methodical, and she found herself watching his hands the way she used to watch Thomas work, looking for the place where a person revealed themselves in the small movements. Thomas had been careful, precise. He'd always slowed down when something mattered. Rhett worked fast, but he worked right. "Decker doesn't like me," he said after the second post. "Decker doesn't trust you," she corrected. "It's different." "Is it?" "Trust is earned," she said. "Like is just a feeling. Decker's not interested in feelings. He'll watch what you do and make his own decision." "And you?" Rhett asked. "Same process." She took a breath. "I don't know yet what my process is," she said honestly. "I've never done this before." He glanced at her. "Married a stranger." "Survived this much in this short a time," she said. He was quiet for a moment, then quietly, "You're doing better than you think you are." "Don't do that," she said. "Do what?" "Try to make me feel better. I don't need encouragement. I need fence posts." He drove the next post without another word. And somehow, that was the right answer. It was old Herm who brought the news just before noon. He came in from town at a full trot, which for old Herm, who moved through the world at the pace of a man who had decided long ago that urgency was overrated, meant something was genuinely wrong. He pulled up to the yard, climbed down from his horse with the careful movements of a man whose knees didn't cooperate anymore, and walked straight to Clara. "Vance filed a challenge," he said. "First thing this morning. His lawyer showed up at Briggs's office before 8, says the marriage isn't valid." Clara went still. "On what grounds?" "Says Maddox's pardon is fraudulent." Old Herm pulled a folded paper from his jacket. Says the governor's signature was forged. The word landed in the yard like a stone in still water. Clara took the paper, read it. Her jaw was tight by the second line, tighter by the third. Rhett had come up behind her. She handed him the paper without turning around. She heard him read it, heard the pause when he got to the part about the forgery. "Is it?" she asked. She turned to face him. "Is the signature forged?" He held her gaze. "No." "How do I know that?" "Because I spent 4 months working through proper legal channels to get that pardon," he said. "I have correspondence, I have documentation, I have the name of the governor's aide who handled the paperwork." He folded the paper and handed it back to her. "Vance is buying time. He's buying more than time," Decker said. He'd come around the corner of the barn, and his face had the particular closed-off look it got when he was working very hard to stay calm. "He's buying doubt. He gets people in this county asking questions about whether the marriage is legal, whether you have the right to the land it gives him room to move. Even if Briggs throws out the challenge, Vance wins something." "He wins the story," Clara said. "What?" Decker looked at her. "He wins the story that goes around town," she said. "Clara Whitmore married an outlaw with a fake pardon. Clara Whitmore made a desperate deal that fell apart. Clara Whitmore can't hold on to what's hers." She pressed her lips together. "He's not trying to win in court. He's trying to win at the feed store and the church and the post office." The silence that followed had weight to it. Rhett spoke first. "Then that's where we fight him." She looked at him. "What does that mean?" "It means we go to town," he said. "Today, together. We don't hide out here and let the story build on its own. We go in, we're seen, we answer questions straight, and we let people look at us and decide for themselves." "You want to walk into Gracie Falls with a wanted poster still fresh in half the town's memory," Decker said flatly. "Former wanted poster," Rhett said. "And yes." Decker made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Clara was already thinking. She knew this town. She'd grown up 15 miles south of it, buried her mother here, buried her husband here. She knew whose opinion traveled fastest and whose mattered most, and she knew that Rhett was right. A story left to grow, in the dark, grew wrong every time. "We go this afternoon," she said. Decker opened his mouth. "This afternoon," she said again with the particular quiet that meant the conversation was over. He shut his mouth. Gracie Falls. On a Wednesday afternoon ran at about half speed the feed store, the post office, the general mercantile, the small land office on the corner where Vance's lawyer kept his secondary office. Clara had walked these streets for years, and she knew exactly which eyes would find her the second she turned off the main road. She felt them find her. She didn't look away from any of them. Rhett walked beside her. Not in front, not behind, beside, and his posture said everything it needed to say without a single word. He wasn't performing. He wasn't doing the wide-legged swagger of a man trying to look dangerous. He just walked steady and even, and he looked at the same people who were looking at him and nodded his head like a man who had nothing to prove. It was, Clara thought, the most disarming thing he could possibly have done. The first real test was Ruth Gallagher. Ruth owned the mercantile and had been the unofficial central intelligence of Gracie Falls for 23 years. She knew everything spread half of it and had the moral confidence of a woman who had never once in her life questioned her own judgment. She was also one of the few people in this county who had been genuinely kind to Clara after Thomas died, and that mattered. She was standing at the doorway of the mercantile when they came up the boardwalk, and her expression was the careful blank of a woman doing intense mental calculations. "Clara," she said. "Ruth." Clara stopped, held the woman's gaze. "I expect you've heard." "I've heard several things," Ruth said. "Not all of them consistent with each other." "Then let me give you the consistent version." Clara's voice was steady and clear, loud enough that the two men outside the feed store across the street could hear it if they were paying attention, which they clearly were. "My husband's business partner spent the last 6 months using legal tricks to take my land. I found a lawful way to stop him. His name is Rhett Maddox. He has a valid pardon from the territorial governor, and he is my husband. The challenge Vance filed this morning is a lie, and we intend to prove it." Ruth looked at Rhett, long and level. "Mr. Maddox," she said. "Ma'am." He touched the brim of his hat. "My late husband once said that a man's reputation is what other people make of him," Ruth said, "and his character is what he makes of himself. I don't know your reputation. I never met you before today." She paused. "What do you intend to make of yourself in this town?" It was a test. Clara heard it clearly. She didn't help him with it. Rhett was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Whatever I have to make sure Clara keeps what's hers." Ruth Gallagher looked at him for 5 full seconds. Then she nodded once. "You need anything from the store, Clara, you put it on account. We'll settle at the end of the month the way we always do." "Thank you, Ruth," Clara said. They walked on. And behind them, Clara heard Ruth step back inside. Heard the sound of the woman's voice already talking to someone in the back of the store. The story was turning. The land office was the last stop. Vance's lawyer was a man named Corbett Young. Sharp, featured the kind of young man who had gone to school somewhere east and come back out west with the certainty that he understood things other people didn't. He had set up in the corner office across from the courthouse 3 months ago, right around the time Vance's legal pressure on the ranch had started in earnest. Clara had noticed the timing. She had not forgotten it. Corbett was at his desk when they walked in, and his composure cracked for just a fraction of a second before he reassembled it. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said. "Mr. Maddox." The second name came out slightly more carefully than the first. "We're here about the challenge filed this morning," Clara said. "I'd like to know specifically which documentation Vance is claiming proves the forgery. That's a matter for the court." "It's a matter you made public the minute you filed it," Rhett said. He'd stopped in the center of the room, and he didn't sit down. He didn't touch anything. He just stood there and let his presence fill the space the way certain men could. "You put the word forgery into a legal document, and then you let that document sit in a courthouse where anyone can read it. That's not legal process. That's a smear campaign with filing fees." Corbett's jaw tightened. "My client has legitimate concerns." "Your client has a history of legitimate concerns that turn out to be fabricated," Rhett said. "I can name 3 counties in this territory where Edgar Vance used the same legal tactic on the same kind of target. Widows, small homesteaders, people who couldn't afford to fight back." He took 1 step forward. "I've been collecting documentation on Edgar Vance for 4 months, Mr. Corbett. Long before I walked into that courtroom yesterday. You might want to tell your client that." The silence in the office was so complete that Clara could hear the clock on the wall. Corbett's face had gone carefully neutral, which was more revealing than anger would have been. "That's a significant claim," Corbett said. "It's a significant file," Rhett said. "And it's sitting with a territorial judge in Denver. I sent it 3 weeks ago." He paused. "That was the other part of the pardon arrangement. The governor didn't just sign my pardon out of goodwill. He signed it because I gave him enough to open an investigation into Vance's land dealings across 4 counties. Clara didn't move. She had not known that. She kept her face still through a force of will she hadn't known she had. "So when the forgery challenge lands in front of Briggs," Rhett continued, "it's going to land on the same day Briggs gets a letter from Denver asking some very pointed questions about how a certain land dispute settled so quickly and so conveniently. You might want your client to know that before he spends money, he doesn't need to spend." Corbett said nothing. "Thank you for your time," Rhett said. And he turned and walked out. Clara followed. She waited until they were half a block down the street. Then she stopped. "You didn't tell me that," she said. He stopped, turned. "No. The investigation, the file, the arrangement with the governor. You didn't tell me any of that." "I told you what you needed to know before you made your decision," he said. "I didn't want to hand you a reason to say yes that wasn't actually about your situation." She stared at him. "That's a very fine line." "I know. I don't like it. I know that too." He held her gaze without apology, but also without defense. "I'm telling you now, everything, whatever you want to know." She looked at him for a long moment. The street moved around them, a wagon going past, a dog crossing the road, two women watching from outside the post office. "Tonight," she said, "after supper, you tell me everything." "All right," he said. "All right," she said, and she started walking again, and he fell back into step beside her, and neither of them said anything else until they were in the wagon and out of town, and the weight of the afternoon was settling into something she didn't quite have words for yet. Decker found the note nailed to the barn door when they got back. He pulled it off and read it once, and then walked directly to Clara, with his face doing the thing it did when he was controlling something large. He handed her the paper without speaking. It was short. No signature. 5 words written in a plain, hard hand. "Leave now or burn next." Clara read it twice, folded it, put it in her jacket pocket. Decker was watching her. "Clara, I heard you," she said, though he hadn't spoken. "I know. This is a threat against your life. I know what it is." "Then you know what it means. Vance isn't bluffing. He told Rhett his brother's house burned." "I know about the brother," she said. Decker stopped, looked at her, then looked at Rhett, who was standing a few feet away. "You knew." "He told me last night," Clara said. "Edgar Vance burned his brother's home and called it an accident. A woman and 2 children nearly died." She looked at the barn, at the house, at the fence line and the cattle beyond it, and the blue Colorado sky going gold at the edges in the late afternoon. Thomas had built the barn himself. The house too, mostly. She had helped him hang every door in it. "I'm not leaving," she said. "Clara." "Decker." She turned to him, and her voice had the particular quality it got when the decision was final. "I will not be run off the land my husband died for. I will not hand Edgar Vance what he wants because he's willing to threaten me. That is not who I am. That is not who this family is." She paused. "But I need to know, are you still in? Because what's coming is not going to be quiet. And I won't ask you to stand in the middle of it if you're not sure." He looked at her for a long time. His red hair was catching the last of the afternoon light, and his face was very still. "I've been sure since the day Thomas hired me," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." She nodded. Once. Then she looked at Rhett. He hadn't said anything during the whole exchange. He'd just stood there slightly to the side, letting her run the thing the way she needed to run it. She understood now that this was deliberate. He had read the situation and made a choice to give her the center of it, and she didn't know yet whether that was calculated or genuine, but it was the right call. "You said tonight," he said. "Supper. I'll tell you everything." "Yes," she said. "And then we make a plan. Together," he said. It wasn't sarcastic. It was a genuine question. "Together," she said. It cost her something to say it. She felt the cost and paid it anyway, because some things were worth what they cost. She pulled the note from her pocket. "Read it one more time." Then she walked to the barn door, where Vance's man had pounded the nail in, and she pulled the nail out with her bare hand, and she used it to pin the note right back to the wood. Let them see it there. Let them know she had read it and was still standing. "Old Herm," she called. The old man appeared from around the side of the barn. "Yeah?" "Double-check the water trough locks tonight," she said, "and sleep light." "Always do," he said, and went back around the corner. Clara walked into the house. She did not look back. Looking back was for people who were thinking about leaving, and she had already made that decision so completely that it didn't require any more looking. Thomas had built this place board by board. He had died for it whether he'd meant to or not, and she was going to keep it whatever that required, whatever it cost, whatever came next. She just hadn't known 6 months ago that keeping it would mean learning to trust a stranger who drove fence posts right, and told lawyers the truth, and let her be in charge of her own life even when he probably could have taken over. She put the coffee on. Down the hall, she could hear Rhett moving in the study, quiet and deliberate, the sounds of a careful man who understood that every sound he made in this house was being listened to. She was listening. She was learning. And somewhere outside in the long Colorado dusk, Edgar Vance was rearranging his plan. She could feel it, like weather coming, like the particular stillness before a storm breaks. And you know that what comes next is going to require everything you have. She poured 2 cups, waited. Rhett talked for 2 hours. Clara sat across from him at the kitchen table, and she did not interrupt once, which was not her natural disposition, but which she understood was necessary, because what he was laying out required the full shape of it before she could respond to any piece of it. He started with his brother, Daniel Maddox, 30-year-old homesteader, married with 2 daughters under the age of 5. Daniel had filed on 160 acres of grassland in the San Luis Valley 3 years ago. Good land, flat and fertile close to water. Edgar Vance had wanted that land for 6 months before Daniel filed on it. When Daniel refused to sell, Vance went to work the same way he always did. A note called in through a bank. Vance partially owned a deed challenge based on a surveying error that turned out to be manufactured. And then when all of that moved too slowly, a fire. The fire was set at 2 in the morning. Daniel's wife got the girls out through a back window. Daniel got out last with burns on his hands and arms. They lost everything else: the house, the barn, 2 horses, all their provisions for winter. The fire was ruled accidental. Rhett had been in New Mexico when it happened. By the time he reached his brother's family, they were living in a church hall, surviving on charity, and Daniel's hands had not healed right, and probably never would. Rhett had stood outside that church hall in the cold, and made a decision about what he was going to do with the rest of his life. "I spent the next 8 months building the file," he told Clara. "Every county Vance worked in, every homesteader he pressured out, every note he called in through that bank. I found 4 other fires. 2 were ruled accidental. 1 was ruled undetermined. 1 in Alamosa County, 2 people died." He stopped. "A man named Garrett Poole and his mother. Vance bought the land 6 weeks after the inquest." Clara had gone very still. "That's murder," she said. "That's what the file says," Rhett answered. "That's what I gave the governor. And the governor acted on it. He gave me the pardon. He opened a preliminary inquiry. Whether it goes further—" Rhett shook his head. "That depends on what his investigator finds when he comes through. And it depends on Vance not knowing the investigation is coming before it gets here." Clara set her coffee cup down. "If Vance finds out, he'll burn his own records and move on to the next county," Rhett said. "He's done it before. I think he's done it at least twice." She pressed her fingers against her lips and looked at the table. The note was still in her jacket pocket. "Leave now or burn next." 5 words that felt different now than they had 2 hours ago. Not more frightening. She had already calibrated her fear and settled it into something manageable but more specific. Vance wasn't threatening her because she was inconvenient. He was threatening her because she was in the way of something much larger than one ranch. "He knows about the investigation," she said. "It wasn't a question." Rhett looked at her. "What makes you say that?" "The timing," she said. "He moved against me the day after your pardon came through. Not the week after, not when he'd had time to think the next day. He already knew you were coming here. He already knew why." She met Rhett's eyes. Someone told him, someone who knew about the file, who about. The quiet that followed was the particular kind that came when 2 people arrived at the same bad conclusion at the same time. "The governor's office," Rhett said. "Or someone in it," Clara said. Rhett sat back. His face had the controlled look of a man absorbing a hit and deciding whether to let it show. "If Vance has a contact in the governor's office, then the investigation is compromised before it starts," Clara said. "And you walked into a trap." She watched that land on him. Watched him work through it, not panicking, not denying, just thinking hard and fast. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe the contact only told him I was coming. Maybe the file itself is still clean." He pushed his chair back and stood up. "I need to think." "Sit down," she said. He looked at her. I need you thinking at this table, not pacing that study, she said. Sit down. Let's figure it out together. He sat. And that was the first time she marked it clearly. The way you mark things, you'll need to remember that Rhett Maddox did something, because Clara Whitmore told him to. They were still at the table at midnight when Decker knocked on the back door. He came in without waiting to be invited, which was not like him, and his face had gone past controlled into something that was just barely held together. Ryder came through about an hour ago, he said. Stopped at the north gate. I was doing the late check and I heard him. He reached into his jacket and held out a small folded piece of paper, the kind used for telegraph messages. He said a woman in town asked him to bring this out. Said her name was Ruth Gallagher. Clara took it. Read it. Her throat tightened. She passed it to Rhett without speaking. He read it and set it flat on the table. Ruth's message was 8 words. Corbett left for Denver this afternoon. Take care. Corbett, Vance's lawyer. Gone to Denver where the governor's office was, where the investigation file sat, where the one person who could derail the whole thing needed only a few hours with the right contact to do it. How long is the ride to Denver? Clara asked. Hard ride 2 days, Rhett said. Corbett will be there day after tomorrow. Then we have 2 days to do something, she said. There's nothing we can do about Denver from here, Rhett said. The file's already there. Either it's protected or it isn't. Either the investigator is clean or he isn't. He folded the telegraph message and handed it back to Clara. What we can do is make sure that whatever Vance is planning here happens somewhere we can see it coming. Decker looked between them. What does that mean? It means Vance isn't going to wait for Corbett to come back, Rhett said. He sent Corbett to handle Denver. He's going to handle this end himself, and he's going to do it fast before any word comes back here about what Corbett's doing. He looked at Clara. The note on the barn door wasn't a warning. It was a schedule. Clara understood immediately. He told us when, she said. He told us before he expected us to be ready. He thinks you're frightened, Rhett said. He thinks that note either ran you off or ran you to ground. He's not expecting you to be sitting at a kitchen table making plans at midnight. Good, she said. She pulled the note from her pocket and set it on the table next to Ruth's telegraph. She looked at both of them. Then let's use what he doesn't know. They were up before dawn. The plan was not complicated, which was why it had a chance of working. Complicated plans required all their pieces to cooperate. This one required only 3 things: Rhett riding to the neighboring homestead to get help from the Garrity brothers, who had their own grievances with Vance and their own reasons to act. Decker riding the fence line to identify any weak points Vance's men might use to approach the property without being seen, and Clara going back to town, alone. Rhett had objected to that part. Not loudly, not controlling, he'd stated his concern once clearly and then waited for her response. I need Ruth Gallagher, Clara said. Ruth knows something she didn't put in that telegraph. She's careful she doesn't send 8 words when she has 20 to say, unless the extra 12 felt too dangerous to write down. I need to talk to her face to face. Then I'll go with you, he said. You going with me makes it a confrontation, she said. Me going alone makes it 2 women having coffee. There's a difference. He held her gaze. I don't like it. You don't have to like it, she said. You have to trust it. That stopped him. She watched him work through it, the instinct to protect fighting with the thing he'd promised her, the thing she'd asked him for on the very first day. Don't manage me. Be back by noon, he said. By noon? She agreed. She was out the door before either of them could think too much about the fact that they had just negotiated a decision like 2 people who had been doing it for years. Ruth Gallagher was waiting at the back door of the Mercantile with coffee already poured. She pulled Clara inside before a word was spoken and closed the door behind them. And the particular urgency of that movement told Clara that whatever Ruth hadn't written in the telegraph was considerably worse than what she had. Corbett came to see me yesterday, Ruth said. She sat down across from Clara and wrapped both hands around her own cup. Before he left for Denver, he didn't announce himself, just walked in at closing time, like he had every right to ask me to step into the back room. What did he want? He wanted to know about Thomas, Ruth said, about how he died, whether I had ever heard anything that contradicted the official account. She paused. Whether I had ever heard anyone suggest it wasn't an accident. Clara's hand stopped moving. Thomas was shot. It was ruled an accident. A hunting party. I know what it was ruled, Ruth said. And I told him the same. She looked at Clara steadily. But Clara, that's not the first time someone's asked me that question. Marshal Grady asked me the same thing 4 months after it happened. Almost the exact same words. The kitchen was very quiet. Grady asked you, Clara said slowly, whether Thomas's death was an accident. He did. And what did you tell him? Same thing I told Corbett, Ruth said. That I didn't know anything contrary to the official account. She set her cup down. But I'll tell you something I didn't tell either of them. The morning before Thomas died, he came into this store. He was in a hurry, bought a few things, started to leave, and then he came back to the counter, and he said to me, Ruth, if anything happens to me, you tell Clara to look at the second survey, the original one before Vance's man came through. She met Clara's eyes. I thought at the time it was just talk. Worried talk. Thomas was always worrying about the ranch finances. I didn't think... She stopped. You didn't think it was a warning, Clara said. No. Ruth's voice had gone tight. I think about it now. Every day I think about it. The second survey. Clara pressed her hands flat on the table and did the arithmetic. Vance had used a surveying error to go after Daniel Maddox's land. He'd used the same kind of claim against the Whitmore Ranch, a procedural challenge to the deed. But the original survey, the one filed before Vance's man came through, if the original survey shows different boundary lines, Clara said, it changes the validity of Vance's deed claim entirely. It doesn't just protect my land, it proves the challenge was built on falsified data. Ruth nodded. Thomas knew it. That's what he was trying to tell me. Where is the original survey? The land office would have it. But Corbett works out of the land office, Clara said, and Corbett left for Denver yesterday. She was already standing. Which means that office has been unoccupied since yesterday afternoon. Ruth looked at her. Clara, you cannot break into a government office. I'm not going to break in, Clara said. I'm going to walk through the front door. The land office holds documents pertaining to my property. I have legal standing to request access. You can request it. You can't demand it without... The clerk is Miles Finch, Clara said. He owes Thomas Whitmore 3 years of goodwill for a land dispute Thomas helped him settle without ever taking a penny. I'm going to go remind him of that. She put on her jacket. Thank you, Ruth, for all of it. For the Telegraph for telling me this. She paused. You should have told me about what Thomas said sooner. I know, Ruth said quietly. I'm sorry. Clara nodded. Let it go. There was no time for anything that was in the past. Miles Finch was a small, anxious man who kept his desk in a state of aggressive organization and found any deviation from expected procedure physically uncomfortable. When Clara walked through the front door of the land office and told him calmly and directly that she needed to review the original survey documentation for the Whitmore property, his first instinct was to tell her she needed to file a formal request. His second instinct, which arrived about 3 seconds after she quietly mentioned Thomas's name and the Finch boundary dispute of 1881, was to go find the file himself. He was back in 4 minutes. He set the folder on the counter without speaking and went to stand at the far end of the room, studying something on the wall with extraordinary concentration. Clara opened the folder. The original survey was dated 1877. It was drawn in a clean, careful hand boundary lines, precise coordinates noted at each corner. She ran her finger along the eastern edge of the property. Then she found it. A second page added later with a different handwriting and a different date. 1882, the year after Thomas had begun expanding the ranch. The eastern boundary line had been redrawn by approximately 40 feet. Running directly through what was now the water access easement, that connected the Whitmore property to the creek. Without that easement, the ranch had limited water access. With limited water access, the land was worth a fraction of its current value. And without that value, any legal challenge Vance filed would be for far less than the property had been assessed, at which meant his deed claim was based on an inflated, falsified assessment. Thomas hadn't just found a surveying error. He'd found the mechanism Vance used to devalue properties before he moved against them. Her husband had been 3 steps ahead of Edgar Vance, and Edgar Vance had known it. She stood at that counter for a long moment. The document in front of her was evidence of fraud so clear that a first-year lawyer could make a case from it. It was also evidence of a motive, a very clear, very serious motive, for why Thomas Whitmore had ended up face down in a creek with a bullet in his back. She made herself breathe. She asked Miles Finch, very calmly, to make her a copy of both pages. He did it without speaking, without looking at her, and when he handed her the copies, his hands were not entirely steady. "Miles," she said, "Mrs. Whitmore. Lock this office today. Don't open it for Corbett when he comes back without a direct order from Judge Briggs in writing." He swallowed. "Mrs. Whitmore, I can't—" "You can," she said. "And you will because you know what this is, and you know what he is, and you are not the kind of man who helps him do it." She met his eyes. "Thomas knew that about you. That's why he helped you when no one else would." Finch looked at the folder on his desk. He looked at Clara. He locked the front door behind her when she left. She was back at the ranch by 11. Rhett was in the yard, and he saw her face the moment she came through the gate, and his whole posture shifted not toward alarm, but toward readiness. The distinction was important. She handed him the copied pages without preamble. He read them in under 2 minutes. She watched his jaw tighten on the second page. "Thomas found this," Rhett said. "Before he died," she confirmed. He looked up at her. His eyes were doing the particular thing they did when he was moving fast through implications following each one to its end. Vance knew Thomas had found it. Yes. "Then Thomas didn't die in a hunting accident," he said. "No," she said. She had said the word to herself 11 times on the ride back from town, practicing it, making herself say it out loud to nobody, until it didn't break her voice. It still cost her something, but her voice held. He didn't. Rhett was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful in the way of a man who understood that the wrong tone right now would do damage. "I'm sorry, Clara." "Don't," she said. "Not yet. There's no time for that yet." "All right." "Where are we with the Garrity brothers?" "Ben Garrity will have 4 men here by nightfall," Rhett said. "He didn't ask questions, which tells me he's been waiting for this." "Good. And Decker found 2 gaps in the north fence line, both on the creek side. If Vance sends men in tonight, they'll come from the creek side," she said. "That's where the water easement is. That's what he wants to control first." She folded the copied survey pages and put them in her jacket, the same pocket where she'd put the threatening note 2 days ago, and Ruth's telegraph, and the weight of everything she was carrying was getting considerable. "We're not waiting for him to make the first move." Rhett looked at her. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that we have enough," she said. "The survey evidence, your file in Denver, the pattern across 4 counties. I'm thinking that we get all of it together in front of Judge Briggs tonight before Corbett gets back from Denver, before Vance makes his next move." She met Rhett's eyes. "I'm thinking we stop playing defense." He was quiet for half a second. "Then, Briggs may not be clean." "Briggs may not be," she agreed. "But Briggs has been in this territory for 20 years, and he has a family here and a reputation he has not entirely thrown away. If we give him something documented and verified and witnessed, he has more to lose by protecting Vance than by acting on what's in front of him." She paused. "I'm betting on a man's instinct towards self-preservation." "That's a narrow bet." "It's the one we have." He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved across his face that she couldn't fully read. Not doubt, Not admiration exactly, but something in the space between those two things. Something that was trying to name itself. "Decker," he called. Decker appeared from the barn. "Yeah. Can you ride to the Garrity place and get Ben here before 6? Old Herm came around the corner, moving faster than his knees usually allowed. "You want me to go to Briggs? How did you—" Clara started. "Been listening from the other side of that fence for 10 minutes. Old Herm said, without a trace of apology. "I'm old, not deaf." He looked at her steadily. "I know Briggs. Went to school with his older brother. He's not a bad man. He's a man who made a few bad compromises and has been uncomfortable about it ever since." He squinted at her. "You give me those pages, I'll go talk to him myself, man to man, before supper." Clara looked at Rhett. He gave the smallest nod. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the survey copies, held them for a moment, then placed them in Old Herm's weathered hands. "Don't lose those," she said. "Been carrying important things without losing them since before your mama was born," he said. He folded the papers carefully and tucked them into his shirt. Then he walked to the barn slower again, now that he wasn't performing urgency, and the whole sequence of it made Clara want to cry a little, which she absolutely did not do. Rhett came to stand beside her. "You know this could all go wrong tonight," he said. "Not pessimism, just fact." "I know," she said. "You know Vance is going to move the moment he hears we've been to Briggs." "I know that too." "And you're still—" "I'm still," she said. "Because I have been scared, and I have been quiet, and I have been careful for 6 months, and my husband is dead, and Edgar Vance is still standing and still smiling." She looked at the barn, at the house. "I am done being careful." Rhett said nothing. She turned to look at him, and something in her face must have shifted something she hadn't meant to show, because he held very still, the way he went still when something required his full attention. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she said. "Because you're the most formidable person I've been around in a long time," he said. "And I've been around some formidable people." She held his gaze, let the words sit, didn't deflect them or dismiss them. "Don't say things like that," she said finally. "Why not?" "Because I'm still deciding what you are to me," she said. "And things like that make it harder to think clearly." He nodded once, looked away, gave her the space of it, and she stood there in the yard of the ranch Thomas had built, holding every piece of what she knew and what she feared, and what she was beginning against all logic and against all caution to feel, and she understood with perfect clarity that by morning everything was going to be different. She didn't know yet which direction different was going to fall, but she was standing up to meet it. That was going to have to be enough. Old Herm came back at 8:30 with Judge Briggs riding beside him. Clara saw them coming from the kitchen window, and she set down the cup she was holding and went to the door without rushing, because rushing was for people who hadn't already decided how they were going to handle whatever walked through the gate. She had decided. She was ready. Briggs dismounted stiffly. He was 62, heavy through the middle, with the careful movements of a man whose body had started objecting to his decisions. He handed his reins to Old Herm without comment and walked toward the house with his hat in his hands. That was the first thing Clara noted. Hat in hands. Not on his head, not tucked under his arm, held in front of him, both hands wrapped around the brim. The posture of a man who had come to say something he hadn't found easy to say. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said. "Judge Briggs," she said. "Come inside." Rhett was at the table. He stood when Briggs entered, which was the right call, respectful, without being deferential, present, without being threatening. Clara had not told him to do that. He'd read the room before he walked into it, which was something she was beginning to understand was just how he operated. Briggs looked at him. Something passed between the two men. Not hostility, not warmth, but a kind of mutual acknowledgement. Two people who understood the stakes of the conversation they were about to have. "Sit down, Judge," Clara said. "I'll get coffee." "Thank you," he said, and sat. She poured 3 cups and put them on the table and sat across from Briggs. Rhett stayed where he was, one hand resting on the back of his chair. "Herm showed me the survey documents," Briggs said. He wrapped his hands around the coffee cup. "The originals, The alteration. Yes, Clara said. You understand what you're claiming. I'm not claiming anything, she said. I'm showing you documented evidence of a falsified land survey used to support a fraudulent deed challenge. The claim makes itself. Briggs was quiet for a moment. The alteration was made in 1882. After Vance's surveyor came through, Rhett said. I was on the bench in 1882, Briggs said. He said it like a confession and looked at the table. I ruled on 3 land disputes that year. 2 of them involved eastern boundary assessments. He stopped. I may have ruled on falsified surveys. You may have, Clara said. Her voice was even. If you did, you didn't know they were falsified. That's different from knowing and proceeding. He looked up at her. That's a generous interpretation. It's the accurate one, she said. And it's the one that matters right now. What matters right now is what you do with what you're looking at tonight. Briggs turned the cup slowly in his hands. Clara watched him work through it, the weight of 20 years of compromises, the cost of this particular moment, the arithmetic of what he stood to lose and gain. Vance has a file on me, Briggs said. He said it quietly, the way men say the thing they've been carrying for a long time. From 12 years ago, a land transaction that wasn't entirely clean. He's used it to keep me cooperative. Not directing my decisions, not exactly, but... He stopped. When his challenges came through, I found reasons to move them forward rather than dismiss them. The kitchen was very still. Clara had not expected a confession. She absorbed it and kept her face neutral. That file, she said. Does it exist anywhere besides Vance's possession? I don't know, Briggs said. If we take Vance down, Rhett said from behind his chair, every piece of leverage he holds goes with him. That file, whatever's in it, it loses its power the moment he loses his. Briggs looked at him. And if the investigation fails, if Corbett gets to Denver and neutralizes whatever you sent to the governor, then we're all in trouble, Rhett said. But you're already in trouble, Judge. The only difference between the trouble you're in now and the trouble coming is whether you chose it or had it chosen for you. Briggs was quiet for a long time. Outside, Clara could hear the sounds of Ben Garrity's men settling in around the property. The low voices, the movement of horses. She had told Garrity's men to stay quiet and stay positioned, and they were doing both. What do you need from me? Briggs said finally. Clara had the answer ready. She'd had it ready since she'd ridden back from town with the survey copies burning a hole in her pocket. An emergency injunction, she said. Tonight. Halting all legal proceedings related to the Whitmore property, pending a full review of the survey documentation. Simultaneously, a request to Marshal Grady in writing from you to take Edgar Vance in for questioning. She paused. Not arrest. Questioning. Just enough to slow him down and put him in a room where he can't direct whatever he's planning for tonight. Briggs looked at her. You think he's moving tonight? I think he sent a lawyer to Denver and a threatening note to my barn door on the same day, she said. He's coordinating, both ends at once. Whatever he's planning for this property, it happens while Corbett is running interference in Denver. She held Briggs's gaze. We have maybe 4 hours before he makes his move. Briggs set down his cup, straightened. Something in him had shifted the slope of his shoulders the way he held his jaw. Not the posture of a compromised man. The posture of a man who had decided something and was now simply executing the decision. I'll need paper, he said. And Grady. Herm is bringing Grady, Clara said. He should be here within the hour. Briggs looked at her steadily. You planned this very carefully. My husband planned some of it, she said. I finished it.
Chatter.
Marshal Ray Grady arrived at 9:15. And the expression on his face when he walked into the kitchen and found Judge Briggs sitting at Clara Whitmore's table told her everything she needed to know about what he'd been expecting the evening to look like. He was a solid man, Grady competent in the specific, limited way of someone who followed procedure, because procedure was comfortable and deviation was not. He had been marshal for 11 years and had handled things in this county the way things were handled, which was to say, he had accommodated the powerful and processed the powerless, and told himself, that this was simply the nature of the world. He looked at Briggs. "Harlan, Ray," Briggs said. "Sit down. This is going to take a few minutes, and you're going to want to be sitting when you hear it." Grady sat. Briggs talked. Clara let him do it. She had given Briggs the evidence and the argument and the direction, and now she watched him make it his own. Watched him lay it out with the authority of a man who understood the law and had spent too long bending it and was now perhaps for the first time in a decade using it straight. Grady's face moved through several stages. Surprise, disbelief, calculation, and then at the part about Thomas, about the survey and the motive, something that crossed over from professional expression into something more personal and harder to categorize. "Thomas Whitmore," Grady said slowly. "You're saying Vance had him. I'm saying the evidence strongly suggests it," Briggs said. "I'm saying there is documented motive and a pattern of behavior across 4 counties that a territorial investigator is already looking at." He pushed the survey copies across the table to Grady. "I'm saying this county has been asleep on this for 3 years and people have died." Grady looked at the survey copies. He looked at them for a long time. Then he looked at Clara. "I asked Ruth Gallagher about Thomas's death," he said. 4 months after. I had a feeling, not evidence, just a feeling." He stopped. "I was told to let it go." "By whom?" Clara asked. He held her gaze. "By a man I should not have listened to." "Was it Vance?" Rhett said. Grady looked at him. "A beat." "His lawyer. Corbett came to see me. Said the case was closed, said opening it back up would only cause Clara more pain." He paused. "I let it go. I shouldn't have." The admission sat in the room like something that had been held under water for a long time and had finally surfaced. Clara pressed her hands flat on the table. "Then help us fix it," she said. "Tonight." The injunction took 40 minutes to draft. Briggs wrote it in Clara's kitchen by lamplight, careful and thorough, citing the survey evidence by document number and date. Grady co-signed as witness. When it was done, Briggs handed it to Clara, and she read it twice and passed it to Rhett, and he read it once. "This is solid," Rhett said. "It should be," Briggs said quietly. "It might be the most solid thing I've put my name to in a long time." Clara stood up. She did not thank him because thanks felt too small for what was happening, and too large for what was still ahead. "Grady," she said, "you'll go to Vance's property." "I'll take 2 deputies, Grady said. He was already on his feet, already moving with the purpose of a man who had decided to act before he could change his mind. "I'll bring him in for questioning on the survey falsification. That gives me reason, and it gives me time." He paused at the door. "Clara, I'm sorry. About Thomas. I should have pushed harder." "You can push now," she said. "That counts." He nodded and went out. The kitchen felt different after he left. Quieter, but not empty. Charged the way air feels charged before lightning, all the potential of it still unresolved. Decker came through the back door. He'd been outside coordinating with Ben Garrity's men, and his jacket was damp from the night air, and his face was tight. "2 riders," he said. "Coming from the creek side. Ben's men spotted them 20 minutes ago. They're not moving fast, which means they're trying not to be heard." Clara and Rhett looked at each other. "He sent them before Grady could get to him," Rhett said. "He didn't know Grady was coming," Clara said. "He was already moving." She turned to Decker. "How many of Ben's men at the creek line?" 3. "That's enough to hold the gap if it stays at 2 riders," Rhett said. "If there are more coming, we don't know about him." "There are more coming," Decker said. His voice was flat and certain. "I know because I found something." He reached inside his jacket and held out a small rolled piece of paper. "One of Garrity's men found it caught on the fence wire at the North Gap. Looked like it had been there since this afternoon." Clara unrolled it. It was a rough hand-drawn map, the Whitmore property north fence line creek approach marked with an arrow, and along the bottom, 2 words and a time, all sides. Midnight. She looked at the clock on the wall. It was 10:47. The next hour was the fastest, and the most completely focused of Clara's life. Rhett took charge of the exterior without being asked, not taking over, but moving into the space that needed filling, coordinating with Garrity's men and positioning Decker at the north fence, while old Herm, who turned out to have considerably more experience with this kind of situation than Clara had ever given him credit for, took the south side near the water trough with a rifle he handled with practiced ease. Clara stayed in the house, not because she'd been told to. Nobody told her anything, but because the house was where the injunction was, where the survey documents were, where everything they had built over the last 48 hours existed as physical, tangible proof. And if Vance's men got into the house, all of it could disappear. She understood that. She accepted it. She stood at the kitchen table with Thomas's hunting rifle, which she had learned to use 2 years ago and had never once needed until tonight. At 11:20, she heard the first shot from the north fence. One shot. Then voices shouted, then cut off, then quiet. She gripped the rifle and listened with everything she had. Footsteps on the porch. She turned. Rhett came through the front door. He was breathing hard, but not hurt. She checked for that first fast, and without trying to conceal that she was checking. 2 riders at the north fence, he said. Garrity's men held them. They're down, not dead, just down. Tied. He stopped in front of her. That's not the main group. I know, she said. The map said all sides. They'll come from the south next, try to draw our people away from the... He stopped. They both heard it at the same time. Not from outside. From directly below, the sound of something moving against the underside of the back porch, slow and deliberate. Clara moved without thinking. She crossed to the back door, put her hand flat against it to feel for heat. Thomas had told her once. Do that first always, and felt nothing. She stepped to the side of the door frame, away from direct line of sight through the window. Rhett was already beside her. Close. She could feel the steadiness coming off him. Not calm exactly, but the particular controlled stillness of someone who had been in this kind of moment before and had learned to use it rather than fight it. The back porch creaked. 1 step. 2. Then the door handle turned. Clara raised the rifle. The door opened. The man who came through was not one of Vance's hired hands. Clara had been expecting a stranger. She had been preparing herself for a stranger. It was not a stranger. It was Corbett. He had not gone to Denver. Or he had gone and come back in a day impossibly fast, which meant he had never intended to go all the way to Denver. He had ridden hard to wherever Vance's contact in the territorial office was done what needed doing and ridden back. He stopped when he saw them. The calculation on his face ran fast and visible, the options, the exits, the arithmetic of the situation he'd walked into. In his right hand was a leather satchel. In his left was a pistol held low, not raised. Mr. Corbett, Clara said. Her voice was completely even. She did not lower the rifle. Close the door. He didn't close the door. His eyes moved to Rhett. Maddox, you went to the territorial office, Rhett said. Not the governor. Vance's contact isn't in the governor's office. He's in the land registry. Something shifted in Corbett's face. The calculation changed. The land registry can't undo a filed injunction, Clara said. Briggs signed it an hour ago. It's already recorded. She watched Corbett's jaw tighten. Whatever you did in the territorial office tonight, you did it too late. You don't know what I did, he said. I know you came back here, she said, which tells me it didn't work the way you planned. Because if it had worked, you wouldn't need to be here. You'd be wherever men go when they've won. She held his gaze. You're here because you lost, and you're trying to find out how much. Corbett looked at the satchel in his hand. A decision was happening behind his eyes. She could see it moving. That satchel, Rhett said. What's in it? No answer. Documents, Rhett said. Survey files, copies of Vance's records. He took 1 step toward Corbett. Or is it Thomas Whitmore's file, the one Vance kept on, why he needed Thomas out of the way? The satchel moved in Corbett's hand. Not toward Rhett, just a reflex, a protective instinct. It was enough. There is a file, Clara said, not a question. Vance kept documentation on Thomas, on what Thomas had found, and you're holding it. Corbett's composure cracked. Not dramatically, just a hairline fracture at the corner of his mouth, a tightening around his eyes. You have no idea what you're involved in, he said. Either of you. Vance has been operating in this territory for 15 years. You think one injunction and a pardon from a governor who will be out of office in 18 months. Put the gun on the floor, Rhett said. His voice had changed. Not louder, just more final. The voice of a man who had run out of patience for the preamble. Corbett looked at him. He put the gun on the floor. Rhett crossed the room and picked it up in one motion, then held out his other hand. The satchel. Corbett held on to it for another 3 seconds. Then he put it in Rhett's hand. Rhett brought it to Clara. She opened it. There were 4 documents inside. 3 were copies of legal filings, familiar, expected, nothing new. The 4th was a letter. She read it once. Her vision went sharp at the edges, the way it did when something was simultaneously terrible and exactly what she'd been afraid of finding. The letter was dated 14 months ago. It was written in a hand she did not recognize, addressed to Edgar Vance, and it confirmed in careful coded but ultimately readable language that Thomas Whitmore had been identified as a threat to the land consolidation operation, and that steps had been taken to ensure the issue would not progress further. It was signed with initials only, R.W. She handed it to Rhett without speaking. He read it. His face did not change, but his jaw went hard. Who is R.W.? She asked Corbett. Silence. Who is R.W.? She said again. Corbett looked at the floor. I want immunity, he said. In writing from a judge. I'm not saying anything without... The back door opened again and Grady walked in with a deputy at his shoulder and Edgar Vance's wrists in iron. The room stopped. Vance's composure was intact, barely but intact. He looked at the kitchen table, at the documents, at the open satchel, and in the space of 2 seconds, Clara watched him calculate and arrive at the answer and accept it with the particular dignity of a man who had been building toward this moment for 15 years and had always known somewhere below all his certainty that it was coming. He looked at Clara. Clever girl, he said. And it was not entirely unkind, which was the most chilling thing about it. Thomas was cleverer, she said. You should have known that before you moved against him. Something moved across Vance's face, fast, almost too fast to see. Not regret. Never regret. But something adjacent to it. The recognition that he had miscalculated a person and that the miscalculation had cost him everything. Grady, Rhett said. He held up the letter. You need to see this. Grady crossed the room and took it. He read it. His face went very still. R.W., Grady said. You know who it is, Clara said. She was watching him carefully. Grady folded the letter, slow and deliberate. I need to make some additional arrests tonight, he said. This goes further than Vance. How much further? Rhett asked. Grady looked at him. Far enough that you're going to want to make sure that injunction is bulletproof because by morning there are going to be people in this county very motivated to unwind it. Clara looked at the injunction on the table, at the survey copies beside it, at the letter Grady was holding. It's bulletproof, she said. So is everything else. Grady took Vance and Corbett out. His deputy followed. The door closed. The kitchen was suddenly profoundly quiet. Decker appeared from the hallway. He had come in through the front at some point, and she hadn't heard him, which told her how focused she'd been. Garrity's men are holding the south line, he said. No movement since the 2 at the north fence. I think word got back. It got back, Rhett said. They saw Grady ride up with Vance in tow. Decker looked around the room, at the documents on the table, at Clara, at Rhett. He did a slow accounting of the situation, and when he was done, he let out a long breath and sat down heavily in the nearest chair. I'm going to need someone to explain all of this to me. Tomorrow, Clara said. Tonight, he said. Tonight we hold the line until dawn, she said. And then we sleep. Decker nodded, stood up, went back outside. Old Herm appeared in the doorway, rifle still in hand. looking approximately as calm as a man who'd just held a fence line against a coordinated approach had any right to look, which was very calm indeed. "We good?" he said. "We're good, Herm," Clara said. "Good." He turned to go, then stopped. "Thomas would have liked tonight," he said. "He always said the only way to fight a man like Vance was straight at him." He glanced at Rhett. "You did that." He glanced back at Clara. "Both of you." He went out. The door closed again. Clara and Rhett were alone in the kitchen. She became aware all at once of how close they were standing. She had moved at some point in the last hour and had not moved back, and now there were perhaps 3 feet between them, which was nothing, which was everything, which was, she didn't have a word for what it was. She looked at the letter, at R.W. "Do you know who it is?" she asked. "I have a suspicion," he said. "Same suspicion Grady has." "Tell me." He did. 2 words, a name she half recognized from the edges of Thomas's business conversations. Someone she had met once at a county meeting and promptly forgotten because he had seemed entirely forgettable. That was, she understood now, probably deliberate. "Tomorrow," she said. "Grady handles it tomorrow, and we handle what comes after." "And tonight," he said. She looked at him. At this man she had married 6 days ago in an 11-minute ceremony, who drove fence posts right and told lawyers the truth and stood in her kitchen at midnight with someone else's gun in his belt and her dead husband's vindication in his hands. "Tonight," she said, "I need to sit down." He pulled out the nearest chair for her. She sat. He sat across from her, and neither of them spoke for a while, and the silence was the kind that didn't need filling, the silence of 2 people who had been through something together and were still inside the aftermath of it, still finding the edges. "You were right," she said finally. "About all of it. About Vance, about the approach, about going straight at him. You were right too," he said. "About Briggs, about Ruth, about going to town and standing in the street where people could see you." He paused. "I wouldn't have thought of that." "You wouldn't have thought of the Garrity brothers," she said. "No," he admitted. She looked at her hands on the table. "We did this together." "Yes," he said. She looked up at him. "I didn't think that was going to be possible," she said. "When you walked into that courtroom, I didn't think 2 strangers can't just become—" She stopped, tried again. "I didn't think it was going to work." "Does it?" he asked. Quiet. Just the question, no weight on it beyond the question itself. She looked at him for a long moment. "Ask me again in the morning," she said, "when I've slept and I can think straight." "All right," he said. She stood up. Picked up the injunction, the survey copies, tucked them safely together in the drawer under the kitchen counter where she kept things that mattered. She turned down the lamp. "Rhett," she said. "Yeah. Thank you." She said it simply, without qualification. "For tonight. For all of it." He nodded once. He didn't try to add anything to it, which was exactly right. She walked down the hall to her room. She lay down, and she did not sleep immediately. She lay in the dark, and she listened to the house settle. And somewhere down the hall, she heard Rhett move to the study door and close it. And outside she could hear the low voices of Garrity's men at the fence line, and the whole world felt different than it had a week ago. Not better, not worse, not simple, but true. Real. Like the beginning of something that had not yet shown her its full shape. She pressed her hand flat against the blanket and breathed and waited for morning. She slept 3 hours and woke before anyone else. The house was still. Outside, the last of Ben Garrity's men were trading off the fence watch in the gray. Before dawn, voices, low boots, quiet. Clara lay still for 30 seconds and took inventory of what she knew. What had happened, what was still unresolved, and then she got up, because lying down with that much unfinished business was not something she had the patience for. She was at the stove when Rhett came out of the study. He looked like a man who had slept in his clothes, which he had, and like a man who was entirely at peace with that fact, which he also was. He stopped in the kitchen doorway, read the room, read her, and went to the table and sat down without announcing himself. She poured him coffee without being asked. He took it without comment. This was, she realized already, a pattern, 6 days and they already had patterns. Grady came back at 4, Rhett said. I heard him ride up. He didn't knock, just left something on the front step. Clara turned. You didn't wake me. You needed 2 more hours more than you needed whatever he left. He paused. I read it. She set down the coffee pot. And R.W. is Robert Waller, he said. County land assessor. Been in the position for 9 years. Grady picked him up at his home at 2 in the morning. He wrapped his hands around the cup. Waller broke in under an hour. Named 6 other people involved in Vance's operation across the territory. 2 of them are in the legislature. Clara pulled out the chair across from him and sat. The investigation in Denver is now considerably less likely to be compromised, Rhett said. Because 3 of the 6 names Waller gave are the same names I put in the file 4 months ago. It corroborates everything. He looked at her steadily. It's over, Clara. The legal part of it. It's done. She heard the words. She tested them against everything she knew and everything she'd felt in the last week, and found that they held. Not fragile, not provisional, solid, the way the best decisions feel solid, like something you could put your full weight on. Thomas, she said. Yes, he said. Waller. Did he say anything about Thomas specifically? Rhett was quiet for a moment. Vance gave the order. Waller arranged for the man who carried it out. Grady has a name. He paused. It's going to become a murder investigation, a real one this time. Clara pressed her lips together. She had known since the moment she'd read the letter in Corbett's satchel that this was the shape of it. She had prepared herself, or tried to. You cannot entirely prepare yourself for the confirmation that your husband was murdered while you were home making dinner. She sat with it. Let it be what it was. Good, she said finally. Her voice held. That's good. Thomas deserves that. Rhett said nothing. He didn't try to fill the silence with comfort or deflection, and she was grateful for it. More grateful than she would have known how to say. After a moment, she stood up and went back to the stove, because there was breakfast to make, and a ranch to run, and the world did not pause for grief, which was both its cruelty and its mercy. Decker came in at 7 with the morning report, and the information that one of the 2 men Garrity's crew had tied at the north fence had decided overnight that full cooperation with Marshal Grady was preferable to whatever Vance had promised him. The man's name was Pete Selden, and he had been a ranch hand in the county for 12 years before Vance hired him 8 months ago, and what he told Grady's deputy before breakfast was that there had been a third component to Vance's plan for the previous night. Not just the riders at the north fence. Not just Corbett at the back door. Fire. 2 men had been positioned at the south end of the property with enough coal oil to burn the barn and the house, both with instructions to move in at midnight simultaneously with the creek approach. The idea being that Rhett and the ranch hands would be drawn to the north while the fire went up in the south. Old Herm had held the south line. Old Herm, who moved through the world at the pace of a man who had decided urgency was overrated. Clara walked out to where Old Herm was checking the water trough, and she stood in front of him and said, Herm, you held the south line last night against 2 men with coal oil. He looked up. Yep. Why didn't you tell me? You had enough to worry about inside, he said. He went back to the trough. Besides, they were slow. I heard them coming from 50 yards out. Not much of a challenge, frankly. Herm. Clara. She looked at him. This old man with his bad knees and his 40-year-old rifle, and his total inability to perform modesty, and she felt something so large and so compound that she didn't have a name for it. Something made of gratitude and grief and affection, and the specific tenderness you feel for someone who has been loyal to you longer than some people have been alive. Thank you, she said. Thomas hired me. Old Herm said simply. Way I see it, I work for both of you. He went back to the trough. Clara went back inside before the expression on her face could embarrass either of them. The letter from Denver arrived that afternoon. It came via a territorial courier official seal-heavy paper addressed to Mrs. Clara Maddox, which was the first time she had seen that name written on something, and which produced a sensation she did not immediately know how to categorize. She opened it at the kitchen table, with Rhett standing behind her. The territorial governor confirmed receipt of the investigation file. The governor confirmed the authenticity of Rhett's pardon. The governor confirmed that a full territorial investigation into Edgar Vance's land consolidation operation was now officially open, and that all property disputes associated with Vance's legal filings were under review pending the investigation's findings. The Whitmore property was specifically named as protected under the review, and at the bottom, a handwritten note in the governor's own hand. The survey evidence provided by Mrs. Maddox together with Mr. Waller's statement is sufficient to initiate criminal proceedings. Well done. Clara folded the letter. It's over, Rhett said. He said it quietly the same way he'd said it that morning, but now it had the weight of paper behind it and not just his word. It's over, she agreed. She sat with the letter in her hands for a moment. Then she put it in the drawer with the injunction, and the survey copies the drawer of things that mattered, and she pushed it closed. Rhett, she said. Yeah. Sit down. I need to ask you something. He sat, across from her. Same positions they'd been in every night at this table for the last 6 days, and she thought about patterns again, and about the things that become ordinary before you realize they've happened. What happens now? She said. For you. The file is submitted. Vance is arrested. Your brother. I'm going to go see Daniel, he said. When this is settled, tell him what happened. Make sure the family is all right. He paused. After that, I don't know. Do you want to go? She asked. Do you want to leave? He looked at her carefully. Not with caution, but with the kind of attention that meant he was taking the question seriously and intended to answer it seriously. I want to do whatever you actually want, he said. Not what you think the right answer is, not what makes sense on paper, what you actually want. She held his gaze. The directness of him, the total absence of performance, was something she had been trying to get used to for 6 days and had not quite managed yet. Every time she expected maneuvering, he just told her the truth. It was, she had decided somewhere around day 3, either the most honest thing she'd ever encountered in a man or the most sophisticated long game she'd ever seen. She had arrived somewhere in the last 24 hours at the conclusion that it was the former. I want you to stay, she said. She said it the way she'd been practicing it since about 3 in the morning, not as a question, not as a negotiation, just as the true thing. I want you to stay on this ranch, and I want to find out what we actually are when there's not a crisis to manage. She paused. I'm not telling you how it ends. I don't know how it ends. But I know I want to find out. He was quiet for a moment. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. And you'll go see Daniel. You'll be gone how long? A week, maybe 10 days. Then I'll expect you back in 10 days, she said. The north fence still needs finishing. His mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something quieter than that, something that lived underneath a smile. I'll be back in 8, he said. He left 2 days later at first light. Decker was in the yard when Rhett brought his horse out. The two men stood a few feet apart for a moment, and something passed between them. Not warmth exactly, not yet, but the beginning of the distance closing. Decker held out his hand. Rhett shook it. Old Herm was at the gate. Don't get shot, he said. Doing my best, Rhett said. Clara was on the porch. He walked over and stopped at the bottom of the steps, didn't come up, didn't close the distance between them any further than that. She stood at the top and looked down at him and thought that she had spent a great deal of the last 8 days making decisions under pressure, and this was the first one that felt entirely free. No court, no deadline, no threatening note, no fire. Just a man on a horse and a woman on a porch, and the choice of what to say. Be careful, she said. Always am, he said. You are categorically not always careful, she said. You walked into a courtroom full of people who were afraid of you and offered to marry a stranger. That is not careful. That was calculated, he said. It was reckless, she said. It worked, but it was reckless. He looked at her. That expression again, the one she'd been seeing more often in the last few days. the one that lived in the space between what he was thinking and what he chose to say. "I'd do it again," he said. She held his gaze. "I know," she said. "So would I." He held the look for one more second. Then he put his hat on mounted and rode out through the gate without looking back. Old Herm closed the gate behind him. Clara stood on the porch until the sound of hoofbeats faded. Then she went inside and made breakfast for 3, the way she had been doing for 6 days, and the kitchen felt different, but not empty, bigger maybe. Like something had opened up in it that she hadn't known was closed. He came back in 7 days. He came back with Daniel. Clara opened the door and found Rhett on the porch, and behind him, slightly to the side, a thinner, younger version of him. Same dark eyes, same jaw, same stillness, with 2 small girls pressed against his legs and a woman holding his arm. "This is my brother," Rhett said. "Daniel, his wife Nora. The girls are May and Bess," Daniel said. He had a quiet voice. His hands, Clara saw immediately, were scarred, the skin pulled tight across the knuckles and palms, the marks of the fire. He held them in front of him without hiding them, but she could see that he was aware of them, the way you're always aware of the things that have changed you. "Rhett told us everything, about what you did, about the file." He paused. "The property that Vance took from us, the governor's review is going to look at it." "It's in the file specifically," Clara said. "I made sure Rhett included the details before it went to Denver." Daniel looked at her, then at his brother. Something moved between them, brothers talking in the space where words aren't, and whatever it was, it settled something in Daniel's face that had been tight. "Thank you," Nora said. She was a small woman with steady eyes and the look of someone who had carried more than her share without complaint for a long time. Clara recognized the look. She had been wearing it herself for 6 months. "Come inside," Clara said. "All of you." Cheered. They stayed 4 days. In those 4 days, Clara learned things about Rhett Maddox that she could not have learned any other way, through his brother's eyes, through the way he was with the girls, through the old stories that came out over supper and made Daniel laugh and made Rhett look at the table with the expression of a man who was genuinely embarrassed, which she had not seen on his face before, and which she found, to her own amusement, entirely disarming. She learned that he had been the one at age 12 to teach Daniel to ride, that he had a habit of fixing things around whatever house he was in without being asked. She noticed this because he quietly repaired the kitchen window latch on the second morning and didn't mention it. That he actually read not just occasionally, but with the focus of someone who had spent years in places where books were the only company worth having. She learned that Daniel trusted him completely and without reservation. That was, she decided, the most informative thing. On the last night before Daniel's family left after the girls were asleep, and Daniel and Nora had gone to bed, Clara and Rhett sat at the kitchen table in the particular quiet that had become theirs. "Your brother is a good man," she said. "He is," Rhett agreed. "The girls are going to be fine." She'd watched May and Bess for 4 days. Their resilience, their laughter, the way they'd already started claiming corners of the house as their own. Children that age, they bend without breaking. "They get that from Nora," Rhett said. Then, and from watching their father refuse to. She looked at him. "You're proud of him?" "Every day," he said simply. She turned her cup in her hands. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what I said before you left, about wanting to find out what we are." He waited. "I've been finding out," she said. "This week, watching you with your family, watching you on this ranch." She paused. "You fixed the window latch." "It was sticking," he said. "You didn't tell me." "It was a window latch," he said. "It didn't require an announcement." "No," she agreed. "It didn't." She looked at him. "That's what I mean. It's the small things, the fence posts, the window latch, the way you sat back and let me run things in front of Briggs even though half those ideas came from both of us." She stopped. "You're not trying to take over. You're not performing goodness for my benefit. You just are who you are in the actual day-to-day of it." He held her gaze. "Clara, I'm not finished," she said. He stopped. "I was married for 7 years to a man I loved," she said. "A genuinely good man who I chose freely and who chose me. I know what it feels like when something is real." She pressed her hands flat on the table. "This is real. Whatever it is, whatever it becomes, it's real. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise because it happened fast, and it happened sideways, and it started in a courtroom instead of a church." She paused. "I'm saying I'm in. Both feet. Whatever that means for us, I'm in it." Rhett was quiet for a moment. "You know I'm not an easy man," he said. "I've been on the move for 7 years. I don't have a lot of practice being anywhere." "I know," she said. "I'm going to make mistakes," he said. "I'm going to handle things wrong sometimes. I'm going to go too quiet when I should talk, and I'm going to act before I think sometimes." "Rhett," she said. "Yeah, I just told you I'm in," she said. "I'm not asking for a perfect man. I had a good man, and I know the difference between good and perfect. You're not perfect, neither am I." She met his eyes. "Are you in?" He looked at her across the table. "I've been in since the minute you told me not to encourage you," he said. "I've been in since you walked down that courthouse hallway and looked me straight in the face and asked what I wanted. Nobody does that. Nobody just looks at you and asks the real question." He paused. "I walked into that courtroom to do the right thing. I didn't walk in expecting to find someone I wanted to stay for." The kitchen held the words. Clara felt something release in her chest, something she had been holding tightly for so long that she hadn't even noticed the holding anymore. Not grief, not fear. Something older than those more structural. The braced posture of a woman who had learned that the ground could give way and had been compensating for it ever since. She let it go. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. She stood up, picked up both cups and put them in the basin. She turned around and he was standing, and they were close again, that 3-foot distance that had been collapsing incrementally for 8 days. And she looked at him, and he looked at her, and she thought, here. This moment. This is what it is. He raised his hand and touched her face. One hand gentle, just his fingers against her jaw, and she turned into it, the way you turn toward warmth without deciding to. And he kissed her the way a man kisses someone he has been patient for and intends to keep. She kissed him back, the way a woman kisses someone she has chosen on purpose, with her whole mind clear. When they stepped back, the kitchen was the same kitchen it had always been. The same walls, the same lamp, the same window, with the latch he'd fixed without telling her, and everything in it was different. Not new, not fragile, just irrevocably, irreversibly changed. 8 days, she said. You came back in 7. I said I'd be back in 8, he said. I was early. Why? He looked at her. Because I wanted to come home, he said. 3 months later, the territorial investigation concluded. Edgar Vance was convicted on 6 counts of land fraud and 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder. Robert Waller was convicted on 4 counts. 2 members of the territorial legislature resigned their seats before charges could be filed and fled the territory, which the newspapers wrote about for weeks. Corbett struck a cooperation deal that significantly reduced his sentence and secured convictions on 3 of the remaining defendants. Daniel Maddox's land in the San Luis Valley was officially returned to his family. The governor signed the restoration order personally. Thomas Whitmore's death was officially reclassified as homicide. The man who had carried out the act was arrested in New Mexico, extradited to Colorado, and tried. He was convicted in November, before the first snow. Clara was in the courtroom for the verdict. Rhett sat beside her. She held his hand through the reading, and she did not cry, not because she wasn't feeling it, but because what she felt was too complete for tears. It was justice, which is different from comfort, which is harder to earn and heavier to hold and worth exactly everything it costs. When they walked out of the courthouse, it was the same courthouse where everything had started. The same steps, the same street. And she stopped on the top step and looked at the town spread out below her, the people, the ordinary afternoon of it, the feed store and the mercantile and the post office, and Ruth Gallagher visible through the mercantile window. The whole living, breathing daily fact of Gracie Falls carrying on exactly as it always had. And she thought about Thomas. And she thought about the ranch. And she thought about the woman who had sat in a courtroom 8 months ago with trembling hands and a gavel coming down. She didn't have trembling hands anymore. Rhett stopped beside her. He didn't say anything, which was the right thing. She took one breath, then she took his hand. "Let's go home," she said. They walked down the steps together into the ordinary afternoon, into the life they had built from nothing but necessity and honesty, and the stubborn insistence on standing, when every reasonable option said to fall, and the life held them, and the land held them, and the truth of what they had become to each other held them most of all. Clara Whitmore had walked into that courtroom alone, afraid and out of options. She walked out of this one with the ranch secured, the truth on record, her husband's name restored, and a man beside her who had chosen her on purpose, just as she had chosen him. And that choice, made in crisis and confirmed in quiet, had turned out to be the one that changed everything. She had not asked for any of it. She had fought for all of it. And everything she had fought for was exactly completely hers.